Chapter 15. Originally, my vacation should be over, but Sue told me that he had called the boss to help me extend it, and I could stay in France for as long as I wanted. I finally understand why my colleagues rejected me so much in the first place. But what does it matter? I don't mind anything anymore. In the days that followed, just like when I first arrived in Japan many years ago, Sue began to take me on a tour all over France. First, I wandered around Paris and its suburbs. Left Bank, Right Bank, Champs-Élysées, Ile de la Cité and Ile Saint-Louis, Latin Quarter, Boulevard, Montmartre. Château de la Château, Louvre, Versailles, Fontainebleau, Notre Dame, Sainte-Chapelle, Sacré-Cœur, art galleries, museums, antiques district, Centre Pompidou, Opera House. Invalides and even La Défense Business District have left our footprints. Sometimes we didn't drive, each of us rides a bicycle on the streets of the right bank, or rides along the bank of the Seine. The old-fashioned stone road is bumpy, and Sue and I burst out laughing. It's strange that Sue, who seems to be such a gentleman at ordinary times, looks so good on his bicycle. I often looked at Sue fascinated, ignoring the traffic situation ahead. Sue was angry and funny, and repeatedly reminded me to ride slowly side by side with him, holding the bike with one hand and supporting my back with the other hand. In this way, I became more lazy, and simply take advantage of the strength to move forward. When the weather is nice, we go for a walk in the Bois de Boulogne to the west. This used to be the king's hunting ground. It's big and the environment is quiet. From the zoo to the playground, then went to Bagatelle Park to see roses, then to Longchamps for horseback riding, and finally sit on the bench by the pond to bask in the sun. You can easily spend the day, very pleasant. Then Sue took me to Burgundy, Alsace, the Loire, Northern Picardy, Lyon, Bordeaux, the Côte d'Azur and Provence. Taste food from all over the world, visit places of interest, taste wine, drink champagne and eat seafood. I haven't been so happy in a long time. But I don't know why, I always compare it to the childhood days in my memory, and feel that today's happiness faintly reveals the sadness of the end times. There are surprises almost every day. When I wake up, I could see a bunch of slender roses made of chocolate handmade by the pillow. Open the wardrobe, I will find a new line of dresses, all of which are delicate, like the fairy princess dresses and fairy tales. They're an extra present on the table. I unwrap the purple packaging. Inside is a pair of beautiful antique ceramic figures dancing. The lights will gradually dim in the middle of the dinner, the crystal spotlight overhead alone covers our table, and the violinist played around us. When we were walking on the street, there would be children running, suddenly stuffing something into my hand. I opened it with confusion, and it was a sterling silver music box with enamel on it. The full clockwork will play the Scarborough Fair in winter, and the buskers and bands inside the box will pose and dance together, which is very interesting and cute. I enjoyed Sue's meticulous pampering and almost forgot all my sorrows. But the reason is unwilling to let go easily. My heart is especially desolate when the happiest. I am almost desperate to overdraw every ounce of happiness in my future life, so decisively and without any scruples. No matter how meticulous he is, Sue never said I love you. Several times, I deliberately drank until I was slightly drunk and stretched my face in front of Sue, stared into his eyes and said with a smile, I love you, do you love me? Sue squeezed my cheeks, and his tone was so calm that he almost cried, Princess Ruth, you know that I will always love you. I stare earnestly into his eyes and ask again and again, the answer is always the same. Really discouraging. But I still can't help it, like moths flying into fire. We spent the Chinese New Year in the lunar calendar while playing. On February 12th, the 8th day of the lunar calendar, we were in Arles, Provence, southern France. We came to the place Lamartine where Van Gogh lived. We saw the Cavalry Gate and the old city wall opposite. Sue took me to the Colosseum, the ancient theater, the Republic walking along the field and the Church of St. Trophim. Although the town is not big, it is full of ancient charm. At the door of a bookstore, I was attracted by a group of gorgeous and unique pictures of Provence scenery. I stopped involuntarily to take a closer look. After flipping through a few photo books and postcards, I couldn't put it down. I picked out some. After paying, I looked up, but I couldn't find Sue. I got separated from Sue again. It was another search, but this time I was more certain, because I was sure that Sue would find me. I didn't run around, just turned around at the fork near the bookstore, and soon met Sue, who found me lost. We walked back along the road. Sue rubbed my head and smiled helplessly. "Ruth, if you don't be careful, it's easier to get lost." I shrunk my nose mischievously, just smiled and didn't make a sound. Sue thought for a while and gave me a phone number. "This is my phone number, just for Ruth. You can call it any time you want to see me." Sue leaned over and looked at me. "It's a collect call, 24 hours a day. Ruth, even if you're broken in an embarrassing situation, I'll find you by calling this number. Remember, okay?" I nodded. We went back to Paris the next day. Sue said with regret, "Actually, the early summer in Provence is the most beautiful, with purple lavender and yellow sunflowers everywhere. Ruth, we should come back in June." Originally said to go to see the famous Josephine Rose Garden, but I insisted not. Sue is a little puzzled. "I only say that next time, when we come to the south of France, we will look at it together with lavender and sunflower. It will be even more thrilling and unforgettable." Sue agreed. A playful smile appeared on the corner of my mouth, but a little bit of blood was oozing out of my heart. "I understand that day will never come. Just let me forget about Josephine's Rose Garden. If I watched it with Sue, I probably wouldn't have any expectations in my life. Let me leave the last ray of hope blank, but also to leave a ray of beautiful vision." The second day back to Paris was Valentine's Day. The weather was very nice, sunny and mildly windy. Sue asked me where I wanted to go. I thought about it and said, "Go to the Saint Chapelle on the Isle of Saint. I like the stained glass." The Saint Chapelle is a typical Gothic building, built between 1242 and 1248. When the king was Louis IX, he purchased a house called Crown of Thorns from the Constantinople king Pepin II in 1239. The Saint Chapelle is divided into upper and lower floors. The lower floor is dimly lit, and the chandelier reflects the shadows in the interior. The blue-red decoration style is derived from the imitation of the 19th century, and the arched columns on both sides are gorgeous. The light and shadow effects on the chapel are astounding. The 15-meter stained glass windows depict stories from the Bible, mostly from the 13th century. During the World War, these glasses were unloaded and transported to a safe place free from the war, and they finally passed down from generations to this day. It's human luck. I like to wander the upper floors of the Saint Chapelle, the light streaming in through the stained glass, casting a phantom on the walls. 7 colors of light and shadow create a dreamlike atmosphere. I don't know why there were so few visitors to the Saint Chapel that day, but when I entered the chapel, I found that it was only me and Sue. The sun was warm and bright outside, and it was extraordinarily quiet in the chapel. I stretched out my hand to face the light and placed it on the wall. Sue smiled and watched me enjoy myself. I turned around in front of him and hummed Paul Simon's Scarborough Fair. "Are you going to Scarborough Fair? Parsley, sage, rosemary and thyme, remember me to one who lives there, for once she was a true love of mine." Then I bent down and made a gesture of invitation. Sue twitched the corner of his mouth slightly upwards, bowed his body and took my hand. The other hand gently supported my waist and slipped out a dance step. On the afternoon of Valentine's Day, I danced with Sue in the colorful light and shadow of Saint Chapelle. Driven by Sue's dexterity, I hummed softly and spun again and again. "How beautiful, I wish time would stop here." The soles of my feet suddenly stumbled, my body lost balance, and Sue's quickly blocked and pulled, and I fell into his arms. The singing stopped abruptly, and the dance steps were interrupted. There was applause all around. After I stood firm, I looked up, and I didn't know when a group of tourists had come, all looking at me with smiles on their faces. My face suddenly turned red. The tourists became more and more boisterous, and someone shouted, "Hey, kiss her." Everyone whistled. I turned to look at Sue at a loss, and the corner of Sue's mouth still held a smile. After a few minutes of confrontation, I almost pulled Sue to run away, when Sue suddenly leaned down and pecked my cheek lightly. In the midst of laughter, Sue raised my hand and left the church. For the first time in history, we didn't go out to eat dinner, and Sue did the cooking himself. I really didn't know he had such a good cooking skill. The starter was fragrant cod, the main course was a succulent veal braised in red wine, then a vegetable salad, Lavero cheese, and finally an ice cream specially prepared for me. The pairings Sauterne white wine and Chambertin red wine also complement each other. When I put down the ice cream spoon contentedly, Sue smiled, leaned over and pinched my nose, gluttonous. Then he got up and went around the dining table to pull out the chair for me. "I'll clean up. Her Majesty the Princess, go and change your dress. We'll go to the Ritz Hotel for a private dance later." I took a quick shower, put on a bathrobe and opened the closet. One wall of my room is made of a shutter-style wooden sliding door. When I open it, there is a surprisingly large cloakroom. All kinds of clothes are neatly hung in rows. The dress is especially beautiful, and new styles are added from time to time. I have never been disappointed in Sue's vision. My fingers slid lightly on the silk and satin fabrics of various colors, and my eyes fell on the depths of the hanging, only revealing a piece of black at the corner of the dress. I reached inside and took out that dress. Completely different from the pure elegance of most clothes in the wardrobe, this dress has been taken out and couldn't put back, so I just put it on the bed. I put on my dress, stood in front of the mirror and looked up. The woman inside made me dazzled. Simple cut, sleeveless, slightly loose design, the dress is long and straight, down to my ankle. The middle of the front and rear dress is completely cut from the beginning to the end, and there is no buckle at the top, and the two collars stand up naturally and spread out in a small V shape. The bottom is buckled with a fine drill every inch to the bottom edge. If you wear it on your body, stand still, it will be demure and classical. Tall and slender, with a childlike and innocent face, when the body moves, the diamond buttons between the seam will faintly flash. The snow-white skin looks very attractive. I have never seen myself like this, and I was deeply moved by that mysterious charm. I simply found a hairpin made of broken diamonds, pinned on my wet long hair, and let my hair hang down loosely. I opened the door and went out. The chandeliers in the living room were not turned on, and the light was dim. Only two floor-to-ceiling crystal shade lamps in the corners of the wall were lit. Sue, dressed in a suit, stood by the piano near the terrace with both hands, with his face facing out, looking at Phil Tower on the other side of the bank through the gap. I became mischievous, took off my slippers, and walked silently over barefooted. Sitting on the piano bench, I gently opened the lid, stretched my fingers to play, and slowly pressed the keys. Sue turned around slowly. I raised my face to give him a sweet smile. I saw a confused look flashing in Sue's eyes. There was a dazed and ethereal expression on his face that I had never seen before. He approached step by step, and stopped when he came behind me. I kept playing this tune, over and over. Sue stood quietly behind me and listened silently. For the sixth time, I stopped my fingers, dialed the automatic playback button on the piano, and the piano sounded again. I left the piano bench and turned to look at Sue. "We haven't finished our dance at daytime, do you want to continue?" Sue maintained the expression just now, nodded like a sleepwalker, and took my hand. After hesitating for a while, he is also like me, remove his slippers, a few light spins, and we dance to the center of the living room. The sole of our foots is a huge patchwork of wool and sheepskin, soft and warm. Sue's dance very well, and it made me feel as if I was gliding on the water. Sue's hand was a little cold, but it all right. The familiar smell of cologne on his body reassured me. Occasionally, when I raised my head, I would swipe at Sue's slightly sloping chin and accidentally get pricked by his stubble beard. It's so ticklish, I'll giggle softly. Suddenly, I stumbled, the long skirt corner blocked my next dance step and I slanted down. Sue was one step away, and before he could hold my back, he was pulled by my fall and we fell down together. When we fell to the ground, Sue immediately got up, knelt in front of me and helped me sit up. Ruth, are you all right? Although this fall was on a soft carpet, I still twisted my ankle, it was tingling, and I couldn't get up for a while. I shook my head and tried to smile, and when I saw Sue's furrowed brows, I couldn't help but reach out to smooth it. I could see clearly that Sue stared into my eyes for a moment of loss. Suddenly, we all fell silent, and there was only the sound of piano playing in the living room. An ambiguous atmosphere began to permeate the air. Sue suddenly stretched out his right hand and slid from my forehead, between my brows, the tip of my nose, lip, chin, and cheek in a circular motion. His fingertips trembled slightly. I didn't move or make a sound, just looked at him quietly. Tears welled up in Sue's eyes. I have never seen such a deep sadness in a man's eyes. Sue's tears made me lose the ability to think. Sue's low voice sounded, full of uncontrollable pain. Oh, you are so beautiful. So beautiful. His face slumped, quivering over my lips. At that moment, I felt 2 warm water droplets fall on my cheeks, sliding down to the corner of my lip, and the salty taste gradually filled my mouth. Sue's hands swam behind me, and his fingers were cold, reaching down from the skin of my back inch by inch. The broken diamond buttons fell apart one by one, the satin dress began to slide down from the neckline, and the snow-white skin reflected the black slightly shiny fabric in the dark night. Sue's kiss was gentle and sad, along the lip, chin, and neck all the way down to the collarbone, accompanied by his tears. I feel like there is a void in my heart that is gradually cracking. There is no joy, no sadness, only endless emptiness. It seems like a sacrificial ceremony, and I am the sacrificial offering that is about to be made. I did nothing but closed my eyes and waited peacefully for the arrangement that fate gave me. The sound of the piano suddenly stopped, and the performance ended. The living room fell silent for a while, only the sound of Sue's breathing was heard, hurried and confused. When he woke up, he felt like being punched by someone. Looking at me in a mess, he stood up suddenly, his face pale and hoarse. God, Ruth, my little Ruth, what have I done to you? As if a ghost was chasing him, Sue staggered away and left the house, leaving me alone in the middle of the living room. I went back to my room wrapped in a blanket and tucked into the corner of the bed. I waited all night. When the sky turned white in the morning, Sue still did not come back. I sighed and smiled miserably. I booked the earliest flight of the day to return to Shanghai alone. When I came back, I didn't go back to work at the company. After packing, I only brought a small suitcase and a laptop, and I resolutely left the old house where my grandma lived for many years. After I checked into the hotel, I looked up the rental advertisements and job-seeking notices, and sent an email to my boss to quit my job. It turns out that wanting to evaporate is so easy. I moved to a new house soon, and it is not a problem for me to find a job in a short time. I didn't want to be involved in the advertising industry, so I simply read a 2-month short-term training, got a certificate, and soon found a part-time job in a futures company. Working at the futures company, the marketing usually up and down. Because of this I need to pay extra attention to New York, London and Frankfurt markets. Since I never turned down the offers and was willing to learn and work hard, I made a few orders in a short period of time, and my reputation gradually improved. A month after I left my original company, I contacted my, and she scolded me on the phone, it almost like she peeled off my skin. We met later, and I didn't say a word about the past 3 months, and she also didn't ask me what's happened. When I tell others about my whereabouts, everything settles down. It is already late spring. I occasionally see a few late cherry trees, which bloom especially in the spring at dusk. Vigorous, pink petals fluttering in the wind, the beauty is heartbreaking. Over the next 2 years, I moved 3 more times and changed jobs once. After working in the futures company for a year, soon I fell ill. And finally my helped me hand in my resignation letter. But I can't stop myself. Once I have nothing to do and I am conscious, the things I want to forget will appear against. A week later, I found another job as a product collector for a large supermarket chain, and I was also in charge of window layout, promotion and marketing. I was too busy to do anything. I fell down a year ago, and when I was sent to the hospital, my clothes were stained with the blood I vomited. This time I lost 1/4 of my blood. With my insistence, I finally agreed to take a good rest. After resigning again, my found a friend who recommended me to a fashion magazine as a graphic illustrator. After several cooperations, the other party appreciated my style of painting, so they signed a long-term cooperation agreement. Gradually, I have gained some fame in the industry, and more media and magazines came to me. I picked out a few larger companies with good reputations, and sometimes I would help them design cover for houses. If there is a press conference or showroom arrangement introduced by a familiar friend, I will occasionally make a cameo to help them. Usually the frequent contact was my. She also resigned half a year after I left the company, and formed her own company in partnership with others. Although the operation was very hard, with her good reputation in the industry in the past, her partner Oh Young was also quite talented. The network of connections, and the hard work of 1,000 young and promising comrades in arms, have slowly made a name for themselves. My life was very peaceful, and I gradually got used to a leisurely and peaceful life. Sometimes my will look at me for a long time, my heart fluttering, I just nod and smile. I know what she means. Who doesn't have a bit of the past? Yet what does it matter? No matter how deep the wound is, as long as people don't die, it will eventually heal. Even if there is a scar, it doesn't matter. The most important thing is to learn to forget, so that you can go all the way as if nothing happened. Although I still can't sleep well, I wake up sweaty at midnight, I can still hear my mother's laughter, and there seems to be a salty aftertaste in my mouth, but as long as I get up, take a shower, change clothes, turn over and I can continue my sleep. Over time, I seem to really gradually forget. Now I have to remember that I'm living alone in this city, like many young single women. I am 23 years old. There is a best friend named my. I think this time I can really live this peaceful life. Until the emergence of Queen Josephine. End of chapter 15.